in that direction. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much, and much love to you.
Much love to you as well.
All right, we'll start with the queue. Lisa, you're up next.
Hello, Metax.
Great, thanks, Lisa. You're coming through a little bit calm. If you wish, you can perhaps move closer to your electronics or speak up. It would be greatly appreciated, but I can understand you.
How's this? Is this better?
Somewhat.
Or is this better?
This would be ideal.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Greetings. And much love to you. Been thinking about you a lot.
Much love to you as well. And I'm perceiving your energy. I'm not always necessarily picking up a intellectual thought you might be sending, but your overall energy and your willingness to connect is very obvious to me in terms of your awareness of David's shifting towards the communication with perhaps more with our kind, and I'm aware that you're also still connect very much with the reptiles, but also having an open interest since our last interaction, also due to passing of your own companion. And I'm also very much appreciating of your willingness to reach out to our kind and send you all our love.
Yes. I received that. Thank you. And so that brought up also, we've met before. I remember you saying you in your form as we know as Metax. Is this correct? What form was I in when I met you or knew you? In a different form? Or this human form?
You were in altered form. It was still somewhat of a human form, but you'd chosen for this particular interaction. Remember, depending on where you decide to interact, in some cases the reality or perception is more malleable in your 3D reality, so you were somewhat of a half human, half reptilian entity. Sometimes, however, you choose to bring your human form in a younger version of yourself. And in one instance, you also appeared more like our kind, but not quite.
Wow, that's really interesting.
There's something not unusual in non-material or rather non-3D material world, where you are more able to manipulate your form to a greater extent, yet you switch them up more like clothing. We've noticed that quite a bit of your females especially have a tendency to dress themselves up, so to speak, also as some intermediary stages, even though it's just a non-permanent temporary format. It's also something many do subconsciously and can also reflect on their character and what state of emotionality they're in during the interaction.
So is that like in the astral or like in the sleep state?
Yes, both is possible, but the astral is one way, or the sleep state is always astral, or not always as conscious, so you have different words like astral traveling or lucid dreaming, but essentially they are the same, only in difference in whether you have the conscious or subconscious intention to approach it, but your brain wave patterns are usually in the same length when you're in such states, or rather the quality of interaction usually depends on the level of state that you are in terms of what you would consider a brainwave pattern. So it's usually you're using those different terms for a state that from our perception is not much different.
Is it like is David in that state right now?
This would be a good example, yes. Perhaps not as deep as he would be during what you might consider a dream state in the delta frequencies, but at least we are, again, I'm just using words here from his brain and not considering patterns, but words. The ideas of brainwave patterns being beta waves. I'm aware do you have differences that you're more in a waking state, alpha or beta states. I cannot quite make out a difference here. I'm sifting through information. And the idea being that the more receptive open state is comparable to where he is now. However, when you would be in a fully astral projected state, then likely that state would be even deeper, but it would be before you're achieving a REM sleep.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I haven't really gone into that. Just kind of like maybe tipped to my toe or something.
Well, you have gone perhaps further into it and you're consciously aware, you're just not fully remembering it.
Or I think it's something else and it's just sometimes I'm already doing it.
Yeah, so you just forget the experience once you're finished and you might remember it once your ego mind is ready for it. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your subconscious
Yeah,
mind is a very powerful tool.
it sure is. I can see, I mean, well,
Only you yourself can hinder you in using it. No one else can do it for you, but also no one else can restrict you. It's entirely up to you when you want to open up to certain frequencies, and when your ego mind is able to perceive such, what you're doing already anyway. Not necessary, however, to be even aware of such in order for it to work. And when it comes to such a state like the one that David is in right now, for example, it's always twisting and tweaking to make sure that he's conscious enough to be able to what you consider speaking right now. Or, for example, that he is subconscious enough or unconscious enough for my frequency to override his own ego mind so that his ego steps out of the way. It cannot be as fully immersed as, for example, during direct communication. During automatic writing, however, it works somewhat easier because there's no other person communicating with him. However, and there's a whole different set of circumstances happening there because it's more talking.
yeah. So I mean, I guess I seem like I might, channel. Well, really, we're just when we're writing down things, or I'm writing down things. It's really just me writing down things and getting information and receiving it from others. It's probably not very important where it's exactly coming from. It's really me, anyways. So sometimes because there's times where I want to know, exactly where it's coming from or what energies, but I suppose if I was seeing better, I would already know, like a phone call, a video call. So I guess I wouldn't have any problems in knowing where it's coming from anyways, if it like that.
Not all of you are clear visual, I believe. The correct term for such is. Some of you might be more clairaudient or clairsentient, etc. It doesn't always appear in the same manner. Also, channeling, as you're calling such, has a dimmer or a dial, not just an on and off button. And many of your interactions or your inspirations might be to some degree what you consider channeling. And some of your so-called channeling is to a large degree the ego of the person, and to a large degree not necessarily the entity that the person sings or might be used to connecting to. And sometimes the connection is better or worse. Very rarely it is 100% of the entity that is speaking. I don't think it would be even physically possible for a human to hold some of those frequencies. However, the ideal is obviously there is at least more the entity that's supposed to speak than the person that is translating. And in many cases, the person that has an idea, for example, for writing a book or a or a movie or something similar, or conducting
Or
a game,
drawing.
or holding, or drawing, of course, or writing just something down. They just come up with a fancy idea, like a more poem or something like it, or just having an interaction with a friend, and they suddenly come up with to say something that didn't think about previously, and they would not call it channeling, but it might be just the same percentage as another person who claims to be a perfect channeler of a certain energy would get during such interaction. And you're judging a lot of the quality of such interactions based on the words and the information comes through it. But I would suggest that going by the energy, both of people who are not even aware of what they're doing, as well as people that claim that they're doing this or that. And then you will have a much better way to judge if the connectivity is clear or not. But of course, you would have the sensitivity or the psychic ability, if you will, yourself, in order to be able to determine such quality based on the energy alone. However, if you have the ability, it's certainly a better and clear indicator than going by the information or the label that is being put over such a direction, whether you perceive somebody else doing it or whether you're trying to judge the validity of your own interaction.
Yes. And to trust myself. Just trust myself with
That is
whatever's
always
going on.
important, and even more in yourself, trust the process that whatever's coming through is the best that it can come through at the moment, and from wherever it's coming, it is the best place to come from. You can send out the intention to our kind or somebody else, however. What matters the most is that you're trusting in the process, and as I mentioned previously, if you remain grounded in the state of law at the same time, then nothing of a great detriment can reach you anyway, and you just trust that the best possible direction is happening anyway.
Yes, agreed. That's a process in itself. Also, I just one more question. I've been thinking about in all dimensions and everything existing at one time. Then there really isn't a necessity to change others or eradicate them, because I really ultimately I would, if I'm able to, shift my frequency to the one that I'm wanting to create. And then it would just automatically match with that frequency of others and in that time, even like having, to that earth time where
There's no necessity to even define it as such. Your whole idea of changing or eradicating another entity in such a manner is literally the same thing. That is what happens.
yes.
You're just using different words to describe the same process. It might appear different to the viewer, whether you shift or whether somebody else changes depends on the perception of the individual that's looking at it, not necessarily the process. The process is the same. It just appears different depending on the angle from which you're looking at it. So, for example, if you eradicate somebody from your reality, so to speak, to them you have shifted.
Yes.
If you shift to a reality where somebody is different, to your perception, the person changed.
Yes. So yes, I like that. That example that you gave. I think that's good for me to see that it's all me, and that I just end up wherever I am is the place to be.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't have desires. If you feel pulled somewhere, just then let yourself be pulled and move towards any direction in a way, shape, or form you feel
Yes.
pulled towards. It's also part and parcel of the process. Don't remain stuck because you think you're supposed to be somewhere and have to be there. If you feel drawn somewhere, you can also sometimes put some energy towards going somewhere. The important thing is, again, remain grounded in your heart, and you will likely automatically feel pulled in direction that is to your greatest benefit. Remember, you create from the frequency first, not from your thoughts or from your physical reality. This is always a later manifestation of what you're pulsing out in frequency. So therefore, if you want to be in a certain frequency, the easiest part is to be in the frequency, to find the frequency as the one you want to be in, and then let the material world and your thoughts match the frequency rather than trying to come from the opposite end and create a material experience or think of certain things in order to establish a certain frequency or emotional state. You can, of course, play around with such desire in the material world. It is normal to have material desires, and as long as your intellectual brain functioning, it's normal to have certain thoughts and preferred thoughts over others. Just be aware of the fact that the best way to create a certain frequency and be a certain emotional state is to start right there.
Yes, I'm glad that I'm doing that now and seeing that. I can see different things happening, even though I'm at the, I feel like I'm at the beginning stages, but I'm glad that I'm aware of it and practicing or seeing what I can do, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you can, of course, see the physical manifestation in your world as a reference point, and it might be easier for your ego mind to accept that, well, today I wish to experience something. I'm going to meet somebody. When I go to a store or to a meeting with certain people that would normally not be there, but I want this person to be there, and I'm going to create a reality where the person will be there, or something perhaps less direct. Perhaps you just want to have a certain experience of feeling a certain state of bliss when you take a walk, etc. Whether it be a state of being or it be a physical manifestation, is often much easier to convince your ego that it's possible when you create a physical manifestation of meeting a certain person or something similar, or finding a certain physical object in a certain place that you would usually not find it or expect it in from your ego mind. So it's a one way to calm the ego down that you're really doing it and it's in good hands and doesn't need to control everything. So it's not necessarily, I would recommend against creating a physical manifestation with your consciousness. I'm just suggesting, and I've also had this discussion with David and others that talk to me directly, that perhaps being in a certain state emotionally or energetically or both at the same time is more preferable or important, or I would suggest at least to focus more on it than to have a certain physical experience in order to then be at a certain state that you enjoy. But again, you must decide from your own consciousness how much the ego needs to perceive in order to be willing to step back and understand that your oversoul is doing a good job in guiding you wherever you need to be, or the connectivity you have to your oversoul being a clear guidance system and that you create from there more efficiently than trying to understand everything in minute detail in terms of manifestation, because you can fall out of an emotional state perhaps and the ego might panic because it doesn't understand how to get back there. But when you create a physical circumstances, then the ego will feel likely more calm because it still perceives the physical reality as more real than the non-physical during your incarnation, which is part and parcel of its job, but also due to the society you live in that has certain belief systems that limit the understanding of the metaphysical world. So therefore you need to be certain that you are always at the point where you can navigate both worlds without feeling you're losing it, so to speak.
Wow.
Hi,
When you
Lisa.
were
I'm
just
sorry. It's
okay,
at
yeah,
time. Just sorry, not to interrupt.
okay, okay. Thank you. That the ego is kind of like a child, one that's kind of like a child, and it's part of our own self and stuff. So I like the way that you described that, and I really like the energy you're putting forth in that, and thank you, and I love you, and I think about you often, and other felines, and much love to you.
Much love to you from us, and also your ego, it's doing a good job.
Yay. Okay, have fun. Love you,
You
Metax.
too.
David could get some water, and then Casper's up next.
Yes, I am. I felt almost a little bit like when you were talking to Lisa about channeling, that I almost felt like you were being channeled a little bit through me at that point. Did you kind of do that, or was that just your energy in general? I felt.
Again, as I mentioned previously when I was talking about channeling, it's a dimmer. It's not a switch or a button. It's